Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda? And there is one amendment, and that is we're going to add under presentations a library in Southern Shores presentation. Do I hear a motion to approve the amended agenda?
Motion to approve the amended agenda, Mr. Mayor.
And do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, and one further comment for the record. We're adding this because there was confusion over what was wanted, and when I brought to everybody's attention what was going on up there as far as making or trying to make a library up in Southern Shores, there were some folks that felt like they didn't have a chance to speak. So that's what this is all about, all right? We're making sure everybody has a chance to speak. We didn't mean to cut anybody out. All right, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? There are none. All right, presentations. We'll start with the Public Works. Jamie?
Morning, Mr. Mayor, members of council. We're here tonight to recognize Jamie Ewers for 5 years of service to the town. Jamie started obviously 5 years ago, 2015. He came to us from the Tidewater area, and he had 10 years of service with the town of Norfolk, or the city of Norfolk, I should say, before getting here. And he moved down and escaped the Tidewater area with his family about 2013. He started with us as a public works technician. He had a plumbing background, which is something we needed and still do and use quite often. And then a couple years after he'd been here, he was promoted and advanced to public works supervisor. Since then, he's kept me from having to do some things that I used to do. It's really worked out good. He keeps the crew working. And the best thing for me is if I'm not here, I have no problem with him handling anything that may come up. So he's also our main grapple truck operator, which is turned into quite a feat for the town, because now we are able to do much more collecting than we used to, which helps all the citizens. So I just want to take a moment to thank him and tell him we appreciate him coming in daily and for all his hard work. Thanks a lot, Joe.
Dr. King, Willie, for giving me the opportunity, and I'm proud to be a part of the town of Kitty Hawk.
And probably glad to be out of Norfolk, no?
Yes.
I would be too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jamie. All right, next we have the library presentations. Mary, are you going to do that?
Yes, I am.
All right. By the way, Mary is the Kitty Hawk representative from Kitty Hawk on that council,
Thank you.
our committee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members, for a few minutes to fill in some of the gaps that I heard in the January meeting. We hadn't been prepared to complete the briefing and wanted to bring you up to date and talk about steps going forward. So just to review, Southern Shores chartered an exploratory committee to examine the feasibility and needs of a modestly sized library in the northern Dare County area. And they included Kitty Hawk and Duck in the committee. Mike Fletcher, our chair, did come and brief you on the survey results. And just to review, there was 80% support in favor of a northern branch, 91% were in favor northern branch to browse, check out, return, read news and periodicals, and 75% said they would use the library more if there was a northern branch. Also, adult and children's programs were specifically mentioned and requested, which indicated to the committee a desire to continue education, research, and gathering space in this area. One digression from the slides, concurrently with the survey development and distribution, we had a group, part of the group, researching sites. And we were looking for an area in a central commercial location. And prior to that, we met with Jonathan Wark, who is the head of Dare County Library System, as well as the Albemarle System. And he filled us in on the process going forward. And what the library would need. He did talk about a 5,000 square foot space, and we researched various libraries, visited Hatteras, Kerala, Camden, and found that Hatteras was about 2,500 square feet. So due to the interest in a modestly sized facility, we looked at that type of space up here. And 4 properties were looked at, 2 dropped out. One was prohibitively expensive. And this one location that you may have heard about, behind Town Bank and owned by Town Bank, kind of checked all the boxes as far as reasonable cost in a central commercial area. They did offer to lease 2,570 square feet, part of this building for 10 years at the cost of $1 a year. And it's quite a remarkable offer on the table. The site adaptation capital cost to bring the facility up to code and for library use was estimated between $150,000 and $175,000. And the estimated operating costs are available based on information from Jonathan Work. Our next steps are to brief the county commissioners next week and welcome an opportunity to work with them and share this information with all the towns and counties to further review the details of the proposal. Following that, we could find ways and means of engaging community support through volunteers, donations, and a path forward can be explored to make this happen. So while proximity is not as much of an issue for Kitty Hawk, there are clear benefits to the residents and students, especially of Kitty Hawk Elementary, on weekends and summers when they don't have the school facility available. So with this generous offer from Town Bank, the committee viewed this as a win-win for Kitty Hawk. And I've included a photo of the building. Again, it would be part of this building on 6 Juniper Trail, and a proposed layout where it would include the functions most requested in the survey from the community. So no decision is requested at this time. We just appreciate the information, the opportunity to fill in some of the information. And if you have any questions, I can answer them. I hope.
You're getting ready to brief the county commissioners.
Yes, sir.
And how about the, I know Albemarle Library System spoke at the first to give you some sense of where to go, but you've not spoken with them since that time?
We have a meeting with him scheduled this week. And there was an interest in touring the facility to see exactly what the layout looked like and what the site adaptation would look like. But he will be up to speed before that briefing next week.
All right, and you'll keep us informed as what the commissioners, as well as the Albemarle Library System, whether they are for it
Yes,
or whatever.
yes.
Okay. Anyone have any questions?
I've got one. The 10-year lease for $1 a year is a great offer. I agree. What kind of discussions have taken place? What do you do after the 10 years?
Yeah.
What happens to the lease then?
Well, all indications are it would continue. It appears to be a marketing opportunity for one-stop shopping, library, bank, shopping, right by the marketplace. I will mention that the third site we had looked at was in the marketplace, and the same rental cost was $50,000 a year. So that's a significant savings, obviously. And also that Jonathan hadn't mentioned any plans for expansion at Kill Devil Hills, which has reached some capacity issues in some areas, or looking for a new facility. So this almost gets in front of their plans to deal with the demand exceeding the capacity.
Anyone else?
Okay, thank you.
David?
I do. Do you know how many folks currently are using the Kill Devil Hills Library now? Has there been some studies done on that?
They said 300, was it per day? 325 per day during the off-season, and over 500 per day in the summer.
Okay.
We do have numbers for the annual use, but I didn't bring them.
And Dare County has cut funding on the Kill Devil Hills Library, correct?
Yes.
Well, in Dare County and the library, Albemarle Library, it's kind of a concerted cut, I think. But anyway.
It's one system, right. And, I mean, this would enable the team to continue to explore other funding sources, grants possibly, private donations, so there are opportunities here.
Okay, well, I'll give you credit. You folks are working hard now. There's no credit. I mean, you deserve credit for that. And we'll see where it goes. Anyone else?
I just have one question. Your handout doesn't show the demographics. What town was, how many from the different towns? It just said 80% support. Was that, who was supporting it? What were the breakdown? And I realized that this was presented to us in another write-up, but I think it's important to reiterate that now.
Okay.
We could provide it to you, but we don't have it with us tonight. But it was impossible with the survey to break down, if you're in Southern Shores, did you vote this, and this? We can tell you how many people from Southern Shores or Kitty Hawk used the survey. And we tell you how many people wanted the library, but we can't tell you how many Kitty Hawk people wanted the library. If you give us that kind of detail.
We
Thank
did
you.
see a 12% response rate, and I think that was the Kitty Hawk number, which isn't bad considering it was a passive survey just on the website. So we may have had a better response if we did a mailing, but there was no budget.
Yeah,
So,
well, a nice pie chart was just done. And if you would, since I got it via email, if you could give that to each of these council members, it would be helpful.
sure. Want to do that?
And
for a
that'll,
minute?
I think it breaks it down a little bit better. It's not perfect because it was a Survey Monkey
I
thing.
understand that.
But it'll help you a little bit too. So if you
Thank
do
you.
that.
I'll get
appreciate
that to Andy then,
Thank you.
tomorrow.
it. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Are you folks happy now? Are you happy now? You got all you wanted to say now?
Just want to keep, I am your rep, so
All
I'm
right.
just trying to keep you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
All right, we're done with that. Public comment. Do we have
What about
anybody?
Rob?
Yes, we do. Do Garrity?
Okay,
Darren?
I'm sorry.
Rob's 5-year recognition?
Oh, we already did that.
Oh, that was the minutes of last week. Never mind, just forget I'm talking.
Okay, don't do that to me.
Good evening, my name is Duke Garrity. I am a member of the Outer Banks Home Builders Association, and I'm here to speak tonight. I know it's not a public hearing, but I know you're going to go over the planning of the new flood prevention ordinance. And I want to give you a little background of some of the things that have been happening for the last few years, what we at the Home Builders Association have been working on. We've been tracking this for about 4 years. We noticed in the very beginning, I said there was going to be some flaws in these new flood maps, and we wanted to address some of them. The words of the community were, a lot of people were saying, well, I can't wait for new flood maps to come in, I can close in under my house. And we tried to explain it's not a good idea. We were hearing from other people, I want to drop my flood insurance, and it's just not a good idea. There's a lot of reasons against it. We get to a whole long discussion. But about 2 years ago, we put together a small group of surveyors, builders, engineers, architects, and just a group, and we met for a year, putting together a plan. And a little bit of it is selfish, that while all the different municipalities were trying to put something together, I said, you know, this is what we go through all the time in building. People don't realize we're dealing with 2 counties and 6 municipalities that all have different rules. people price a house in Kill Devil Hills is different price from a house in Kitty Hawk. So what we tried to do, and we worked very hard on it for a long time, mapped out every plat in Dare County on big maps, and said, why can't we come up with a flood prevention ordinance for the whole county? We could all be on the same page. It wouldn't make a difference which town you were building in. It would count on the zone or the maps of what your base flood elevations were. We knew the base flood elevations, some of them make no sense. Some of them have houses, buildings that had 3 feet of water in them are now not in a flood zone at all. So we sat back and we put something together, and we worked, I said, we worked on this for about a year. Came up with it, and then we invited Donna Creef, the planning manager, planning director from Dare County, into our group, and we said, this is what we've been working on. And she was very excited. She said, I can't believe the Builder Association is doing this. I said, well, we need you now. We need your voice, and we need you to go to all the towns and put this group together with all the planning directors in Dare County, and let's come up with an ordinance that we can all work with. We know there'll be little quirks, but it should be kind of uniform is what we could do. So they have been meeting, and the planning directors have all been working hard on it too. But now we're coming down to the nitty-gritty, and it's time, and it seems that every town wants their own. We've got different rules, different freeboard requirements, different things in every town. And I said, this is kind of defeating the purpose. This afternoon, I got a copy of an email from our planning chairman of our committee, Jay Overton, and it was 42 pages. Yesterday, I got one from Doug, 46 pages. I said, we haven't had time to look at them, and why are these all different? Why did we wait until the towns could come together and we could see if each town is doing, let them work it out by themselves? We agree that there might be some little differences in each town, but it seems like the basis could all be the same, and would make things a lot easier for anybody, even people who live here and decide to move in a few years. So what we think is this scheduled public hearing is a bit premature until all the towns come together and they decide what they want to do, if they want to do this in unison and come with one ordinance, or they just want, everybody wants to go on their own again. So that was a little bit of background. We're willing to keep working. We brought Donna in, I guess, about 2 years ago, so it's been 2 years now, or a year ago. We worked on it for a year, and we're about, it should be ready. We knew we're not lawyers, and we didn't put it into all legal language, but I think it's working. I think we're almost there. To schedule a public hearing now before this is finished, I think is just a little bit premature. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Paul Wright?
Mayor, council, how are y'all doing today? My name is Paul Wright. I'm one of the elected Soil and Water Conservation District Supervisors of Dare County for the state of North Carolina. I'm also the candidate for the District 3 race for the Dare County Board of Commissioners. One, I'd like to congratulate y'all with the partnership that we had with y'all just here recently last year and getting the shoreline project done for Kitty Hawk. That is very important and valuable. Right now, we're up for a nomination for an award on that. So I would really urge y'all to let the community know more about it, because that right there, out of all the townships here in Kitty Hawk, here in Dare County, Kitty Hawk has stood out and worked with my board and bringing more projects that we want to bring to the rest of the county, and we thank y'all for that. I know that y'all have a lot going on with the flood mitigation and the rezoning and everything else, and I was speaking to Mr. Pruitt before the meeting. We have been working on a resolution for the past year of trying to better understand the service districts. It falls up under North Carolina Article 153, North Carolina Statute 153, Article 16 of the General Assembly Laws and Regulations on Service Districts and Zoning for Flood Mitigation here in the state of North Carolina. Currituck County has these service districts in Corova, Corolla, and other areas in flood zones in Currituck County. It's a shame that we have, with the funding and the resources and the stretch of water that we have here in this area, that we do not have these systems set up here in Dare County and in these communities. Right now, up under the legislation is one of the things that I'm going to be pushing for in my election, is that we adopt these service districts to bring in better protections for the homes and the communities. The cost of this is at a ½ cent per $100. So it's raising the taxes just a little bit, but only in the areas that it's needed. Say in the residents of Kitty Hawk Road, just in this area right here, need the protection and the use of the floodwater zones. That area right there will be the only area with an increase in the tax revenue. That's something for y'all to look at and discuss, and I would really appreciate it if y'all came and joined us on February the 11th between 9 and 12 for our next board meeting, so we can help y'all better understand these programs and what they offer and what else we can help y'all with here in the town of Kitty Hawk. Thank you.
Thank you.
Andy? I'm a little bit, I think we're all a little bit behind on that service district, what it means. I mean, we're getting ready to talk about MSDs for beach nourishment. This kind of sounds similar to me in certain ways. So if you could get us some information that enlightens us enough, we at least, I wouldn't ask you a question because I don't know what to ask.
I'm telling you, sometimes with this right here, I don't even know how to answer everything. We've been studying it for over a year. I've taken 2 or 3 classes through the Department of Agriculture on it. There's so much to it, it's so complex, but it is working. Greenville has successfully set it up. New Bern, North Carolina has also set these programs up, these service districts, and they are helping with the floodwater in a tremendous way.
Okay, we'll educate ourselves and see where we go from there. All right, thank you. Anyone else?
No, sir.
Anyone else want to speak? We have 2 public comments, one now and one later. All right, let the record show no one else came forward. Do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? There are none. All right, we had nothing removed. Planning. Next is the question on scheduling a public hearing. There's a reason we're doing this, and it's kind of multiple in different areas. The one thing I got to ask you before you even start, and we're doing a little different. Normally, a call for public hearing is just rote, pro forma. But in this case, because this ordinance is so complex, and it's more than just raising height, there's a lot more to it, because we're talking inspections by certified inspectors twice in some places that we've never had before. So what we're trying to do is to have our public understand that it's not just about making sure we have freeboard at the right level so you don't flood, but rather that there's more to this, and if they want to speak at our public hearing, they'll have a little bit better education to do so. So that's the reason Rob is going to give some basic presentation tonight. It's so we can broadcast what the people need to know, and then they can come tell us if they don't like something. But the thing that's kind of puzzling me a little bit, from everything I've heard, the county, our planner, all the town planners have been working on this same ordinance together. Is that not true?
We have been, and with the understanding that each town is going to have, as Mr. Grady mentioned, different little tweaks here and there, because while we're trying to get it fairly well uniform between all the towns in the county, we understand that we have to make it work for Kitty Hawk. Whereas, and I'll get into an example in the PowerPoint where some of the language that Don has included for Dare County doesn't necessarily work the same for Kitty Hawk. So once we get into the PowerPoint, I'll get into that a little more.
Okay, but for the most part, we all work together.
Right.
And also, the ordinance is a federal, it's put out by the state, but it's a FEMA type ordinance. So there's only so much latitude any of us can maneuver in, no?
Right, the bulk of the ordinance is from the model ordinance, and there's some sections that are optional. You can, choose to add different higher standards in, or
Right.
The local elevation standards is what myself and the other planners have been meeting over the past year, a little over a year, to kind of get the language set on that, where, the amount of properties that are moving into the X zone and the base flood elevation dropping from 8.3 to 4. We're talking about, and so I'll explain it some more through here,
All right.
regulating the X zones and regulating the higher standard.
So what I want, the people that'll watch this later, I want you to understand that what this gentleman is trying to put out to you are some changes that can be costly to you and affect you in a way that you may or may not like. And we're trying to get ahead of the game and give you time to give us a proper hearing. If you don't like something, you need to tell us that, because we have to make a decision one way or the other at some point. All right, please.
All right. So first, just to get into a little bit, because there's a lot of technical jargon and the stuff that we've been working with it for years. It sounds normal and makes sense, but we don't work with it every day. I figured I'd explain a little bit. So the flood zones that are shown on the preliminary flood insurance rate maps, they've got the X and shaded X zones. They're non-special flood hazard areas. They're moderate to low risk. One thing that we've been trying to get out there since these preliminary maps were released 4 years ago is that low risk does not mean no risk. I think it's some quarter of all flood insurance claims come from X zone property. So we're trying to discourage people from dropping their insurance, as Mr. Garrity mentioned previously. We've got the AE zones. These are the areas subject to inundation by the 1% annual chance flood event determined by detailed methods. And these definitions are all straight from FEMA. The AO zones are areas that are subject to inundation by the 1% annual chance shallow flooding, usually sheet flow on sloping terrain, where the average depths are between 1 and 3 feet. The average flood depths are derived from detailed hydraulic analysis. The AH flood zone are areas subject to inundation by the 1% annual chance shallow flooding, usually areas of ponding. We see a lot of this over around Lindbergh, where it's kind of a like a bowl shape over there. Again, average depths between 1 and 3 feet. The AH zones have the base flood elevation that are derived from detailed hydraulic analysis. And then the VE zones that are areas that are subject to inundation by the 1% annual chance flood event with additional hazard due to storm-induced velocity wave action. Again, the BFEs are derived from detailed hydraulic analysis. So this is an image of the current existing 2006 maps. Currently, we have 500 structures in a VE zone and just about 1,900 structures in an AE flood zone. The base flood elevations in the AE zones west of 158 are currently at 8.3 feet, and then we require a 1-foot freeboard, so the top of the first floor is at 9.3 over there. The AE zones that are between the highways are anywhere from 9 to 10 feet, depending on where you're at. And then the V zones over on the ocean front have a base flood between 12 feet and 14 feet. This is the preliminary maps that go effective June 19th of this year. You can see there's 278 structures in the VE zone, 979 structures in the AE zones, and then they're bringing back the AH and AO zones, which we don't have on the current maps. We've got 389 structures in AH and 94 structures in the AO zone. You can see the AE flood, base flood elevation has been reduced from 8.3 feet on the west side down to 4 feet. And there is a small section down at I believe it's the end of Elijah Bond that's AE with base flood elevation of 5 feet. The AH zones between the highways have a base flood elevation of 9 feet and 10 feet. They're kind of replacing the AE zone over on the ocean side. But you can see just the scope of them, the size of the flood zone has been reduced pretty greatly. And then the VE zones with a base flood ranging from 11 to 13 feet. and that's just a side-by-side comparison. You can see on the current maps, the yellow is the X zone, blue is AE, and the kind of teal over the ocean front is the VE zone. On the preliminary maps, blue is AE, the green on the ocean front's VE, the light blue is the AH and the AO zones, and then the non-colored and the yellow are the shaded X and X zones. So as we mentioned, the removal of so many structures from the special flood hazard area and the reduction of the base flood led to the concern of the staff of towns and county. I mentioned we've been working with the other towns in Dare County to develop these local elevation standards as a proposed higher standard to try to mitigate the base flood being reduced and all the properties being removed from flood zones into the X. As you can see, it sets reference levels for shaded X and X zones, which means we're going to be regulating, if this gets approved as presented, it would be regulating an X zone to have basically a base flood elevation, which currently there are no specific flood requirements for X zones. So in addition to providing better protection from flood events, it should have a positive effect on insurance premiums for homeowners as well. You can see in this graph from FEMA, this lowest number is what your premiums are if you built right at base flood elevation, blue being VE zone and green the AE. You can see every foot above base flood, your insurance premium costs are getting cut pretty significantly. And with the local elevation standard that we're talking about doing in the AE zone, it would essentially put a freeboard of about 4 feet in most areas. So it's looking at, about half costs around there in insurance premiums. So we'll get a little bit into the ordinance now. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. As I mentioned, a lot of it's model ordinance required. There are some optional stuff, and I've kind of highlighted the more significant options. If council has any other questions, the full ordinance was provided in the packet, and I'd be happy to answer anything. So let's see. Some of the added definitions of significance. The local elevation standard, as we talked about, defines locally adopted elevation level used in as the RFPE, the regulatory flood protection elevation in the X and shaded X zones, also used to mitigate flood hazards in the AE, AO, AH, and VE zones. Non-conversion agreement is one of the state-provided optional parts that we don't currently require, but staff's recommended putting it in. And what that is going to be if you've got a lower level enclosure that's below base flood elevation, it would require recording a document with your deed just stating that you're not going to convert it to living space. Just gives an extra layer of protection against somebody maybe unintentionally or unknowingly creating below base flood elevation living space, which is only allowed to be parking, storage, and dry access. The tiny homes and park model was optional language provided by the state, just clarifying that these structures that do not fit the definition of an RV will have to be meet the standards of a residential structure, the elevation standards. I left that in, we've been getting more and more questions about tiny homes, tiny houses, and figured it'd be good to have that clarification in there that if it doesn't meet the definition of an RV, then it's going to have to meet the elevation requirements. One thing that's being proposed to change is the reference level. Currently, we look at the top of the bottom floor as being the reference level. So in the AE 8.3, the top of your bottom floor has to be at 9.3 to get that 1 foot of freeboard. The proposed language designates the bottom of the lowest floor as the reference level that would have to meet the base flood elevation. We put that in as we were discussing with the other planners and a couple of building inspectors came to a few of our meetings that we've had. And they recommended going with the bottom of the lowest floor versus the top. That way, you know, the floor joists can be up above the base flood elevation. You have your ductwork under the floor and still be above that base flood. Because anything below that 9.3, if you're in that particular flood zone, has to be flood resistant materials. So it kind of eliminates, if your top of your bottom floor is right at the RFPE, it eliminates you from being able to have any utility work or duct work or anything below the floor. Let's see. So the regulatory flood protection elevation, RFPE, this is where we kind of incorporated this local elevation standard. So in the VE zones and the AH zones, the RFPE is base flood elevation plus 1 foot freeboard, which is what our current practice is now for both the AE and VE zone. The language that was written in on that we discussed, the group of planners and all for the AE zone, is the RFPE is the base flood elevation plus 3 foot of freeboard or to an elevation of 8 feet, whichever is higher. When I took this to the planning board, one of the questions that came up, since the majority of our AE zone is with a base flood of 4 foot, the question I got was why not just eliminate the math and have base flood plus 4 foot freeboard be that level. We're still getting there to that 8 foot level, which would simplify things. There's that small area, and I'll pull up the map after PowerPoint. There's a small area at the end of, I believe it's Elijah Baum, that has the base flood elevation at 5 feet, which would put the RFPE at 9 feet instead of 8, which the top language would get. Either way, they're both still lower than what our current regulations require. And then in the AO zones, the language that was originally proposed is that when the highest adjacent grade is below 8 feet, the RFPE is the designated depth on the firm plus 3 foot of freeboard or an elevation 2 or above 8 foot. And when the highest adjacent grade is at an elevation of 8 feet or higher, the RFPE is the designated base flood depth on the effective firm above the highest adjacent grade. This is another one where we kind of had to deviate from what the county was looking at. As I spoke with Donna about her language that she had in here, she was looking at the elevation at being at 8 feet and didn't want anything below there. And a lot of her, or I don't know if it's a lot, but she mentioned she's had some AO zones that the ground elevations were below 8 feet, 6 or 7 or so. So she wanted to be able to get that floor level up for those situations. When I was looking at the elevation maps for Kitty Hawk, a lot of the areas that we have AO zones, the ground elevation is at 10, 11, 12 feet. So the language that was initially proposed in the county's model ordinance would have had if your ground elevation is at 12 feet and then 2 foot depth required by the firm and then 3 feet of freeboard, then you're up higher than what we would currently regulate in a VE zone. It'd be elevation of 15 feet. So to try to simplify things, after talking with the planning board, and I bounced this one off my contact with the state, and she agreed that the second option is a little cleaner, easier, eliminates the math. The depth designated on the firm or an elevation of 10 feet, whichever is higher. That said, if you're in an AO zone and your ground elevation, your highest adjacent grade is 9 feet, then it would be the depth shown on the map is 2 feet. So you'd have to build 2 feet above grade. You'd be at 11 foot instead of that minimum of 10. I guess on the other side of things, if your ground elevation was at 6, 2 feet wouldn't get you up to 10, so you have to go an additional couple feet up to get to the 10 foot. And then in shaded X and X zones, the RFPE is 8 foot, or the natural grade elevation if the natural grade elevation is higher than 8 feet. And the reason for that second part of that one, I guess, at first reading it sounds a little redundant, but it's to prevent if your ground elevation's at 8 feet, and then you think, okay, well, I can go dig some down to get some extra height on the house, that second part of that sentence kind of eliminates that possibility. All right, so in some of the optional general standards, section 14-14 in the draft, floodplain development application, permit, and certification requirements. Subsection A 4C1 would require a post-construction V-zone certificate to ensure that the work was done as proposed. Currently, we do not require the post-construction one. When a building permit application comes in for a V-zone structure, they have to have this V-zone certificate stamped by an engineer stating that all the work that's going to be done is going to be compliant with our V-zone requirements. This would just be I guess more insurance that it actually was built. The engineer would have to certify that the contractor built it the way they said they were going to build it. Then the next section, C1 and C.
Just a minute. In this particular case, if we adopt that actually requires 2 inspections. Or the certificate before and then a second one after, is that
Right,
correct?
the engineer in the beginning phases would have to engineer to seal the plans that they were acceptable for the V-zone requirements, and then for the post-construction one, I guess they would have to go out in the field and look and meet with the contractor to verify that everything was built the way they said it was going to be built.
That's extra cost to the
Yes,
homeowner.
it would be.
And that's the reason we're doing what we're doing, so people understand that. Thank
And
you.
this is part of, staying on the same page with all the other towns and county.
Right.
I know it's not something that we've done in the past, and this is, areas that different towns might veer away from standard practice of everybody else, depending on what each council, wants to do. So the second part is added language dealing with our local elevation standard. It would waive the under construction elevation certificate in the X and shaded X zones if a survey can indicate that the natural grade is above the RFPE of 8 feet. Currently, we require you could require 3 elevation certificates in the whole process of construction. You could do a pre-construction elevation certificate where the surveyor is saying what the elevation of the floor is going to be. Then the under construction one comes at framing. They go ahead and shoot the elevation shots. If there's anything wrong at that point, it's easier to catch it then versus finished construction. And then we require the finished construction. Currently, we require the under construction and the finished construction for all A zones and B zones, and we require a finished construction elevation certificate for X zone properties, and we get extra CRS points for requiring that. This is just saying we would continue to require the finished construction elevation certificate for X zones, but we would not require them to do an under construction one if a surveyor can, verify that the natural grade is above 8 feet. Let's see, so section 14-19E6. This is where we start getting into regulating the X zone and shaded X zones. For lateral additions that are, we require that the addition to or above the RFP that was applicable at the time of construction. So if it, if it was an X zone property originally, they'd be able to do their addition, or any flood zone that they're in, they'd be able to construct the addition at the elevation that was permitted at the time of the construction of the house. That would prevent people, if they were in X zone and their elevation was at 6, and then they wanted to do an addition, we're not going to make the addition be 2 feet higher than the rest of the house. Remodeling of existing structures with a reference level below the 8-foot RFPE may be authorized at the existing reference level as long as the footprint is not increased. Basically, it's saying that the substantial improvement requirements, that 50% rule, is not going to apply to X zone properties. And again, reconstruction of damaged portions of a structure may be permitted at the existing reference level or higher. That kind of ties in with the substantial damage. Typically, in any of the flood zones, if you propose an addition or a remodel that exceeds 50% of the value of the house, you have to bring the whole house into compliance with the elevation standards. This is just saying that we're not going to apply those standards to X-zone structures. And then areas of existing structures below the RFPE of 8 foot cannot be enclosed or converted to habitable space. That's just where we've set that 8 foot reference level, saying, you know, we've recognized that anything below there is subject to flood damage and want to limit the, you know, the amount of living space we have down there. Section 8, H8, it allows for exemptions from flood venting and elevation certificate requirements for small and or low-cost accessory structures. I believe it's, if it was under 150 square feet for like a shed, it wouldn't need flood vents or an elevation certificate. And if it was 151 square feet to 500 square feet, they would not need to get the elevation certificate, but they would have to provide the flood vents. And then anything over 500 square feet would have to have both. Section 14-21, the standards for areas of shallow flooding, zone AO. The language defines the reference level for the structures within the AO zone. Again, that goes back to the two options that provided, either the 10-foot elevation or the more complicated one that we went over earlier. And that'll be something that, you know, if you think of any questions over the next month, email me and I'll try to answer them at the hearing itself, and we can get further into it at the hearing. And then it should be noted that there are a few sections in the flood damage prevention ordinance, the model ordinance, standards for floodplains without established base flood elevation, standards for riverine floodplains with base flood elevation but without established floodways or non-encroachment areas, and floodways and non-encroachment areas, and then standards for coastal A zones. We don't have any of those zones in Kitty Hawk, so just proposing striking through all of those sections. I've talked with contact at the state. She said if we don't have that flood zone, or if it doesn't apply to us, there's no need to have it in here. And then just to be clear, for the ordinance and flood insurance study adoption, there's nothing that prevents council from adopting it early, the ordinance and the new flood maps, or the flood insurance study, which by effect adopts the maps. If that happens, we can start permitting to the new maps, but insurance-wise, nothing changes until June 19th, 2020. So, if you've got an existing home, if this gets adopted early, you're not going to be able to change your insurance policy before June 19th. If you come in the day after the stuff's approved and you pull a permit to start building a new house, if you get your CO before June 19th, you're going to be paying insurance based on the 2006 maps. So that was just one thing I wanted to make sure it was clear. And then, let's see, Greg Ball at Dare County, their GIS specialist, put together a few maps that have been pretty handy. This first one is just an elevation map. Shows the ground elevation for all the land in Kitty Hawk. You see anything that is green is below 8 foot. So that's the areas that the elevation standard is going to apply to. And then second map here. This one shows the kind of orange shade here is X zones that are below 8 feet in elevation, ground elevation below 8 feet. So when we talk about we're proposing to regulate the X zones, it's not going to affect a whole, the majority of X zone properties. It's the areas that are shaded orange here are going to be the ones that will see that 8 foot elevation. And you can see there's some areas out in Kitty Hawk Landing that are moving to an X zone, which if we just went with the standard like our current ordinance, they'd have no elevation requirements or anything. So seeing that was kind of what helped to clue all of us in that we needed to kind of go for some higher standards here. That's really all I've put together. I don't know if there's any questions tonight, or if you're going to hold them until the public hearing, or like I said, if you don't think of any tonight, you think of some a week from now, email me and I'll address them next month.
Okay. Yeah, and the same would apply to anyone watching this tonight.
Right.
They can ask some questions and be prepared, which is what we're trying to do. Any questions, or shall we move
I have a
forward?
question.
Go ahead.
Is this material available on the website for the people to look at?
The draft ordinance is not at this point, but I'm sure we can get it up there.
I mean, I think it would be, those who are interested should be able to actually see the language of it and know, whether they need to pursue or not.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not a problem putting it up there.
Okay, and the other question I had was, could council have could you possibly email a copy of that PowerPoint presentation? I would really like to be able to flip-flop back and forth as I'm looking at things.
Okay.
And I will just point out again, I mentioned it in the beginning, I didn't go over all of the optional language that was listed in there, just the ones that had the more significant impact relating to elevation. When we come back for the public hearing, I'll get more into the more minor additions.
Yeah, the main thing we wanted to try to make people understand is that it's more than elevation, and it can be costly depending upon the options that we select. And there are options that address the CRS, the community rating system, and we have to have a certain amount of those in order to even have the insurance. Plus, the more options you adopt, the greater your discount is. In this case, it's only 15%, but we want to keep that, so.
Right. If we could improve to the next class, it would get a bigger benefit. And one thing that I wanted to point out that it didn't make it into the PowerPoint, and I don't know how I left it out. Dealing with the language with the non-conversion agreement that's being proposed, the model ordinance provides three options to go along with it. The first option is requiring the non-conversion agreement. You get, for CRS points, you get 30 additional points for including that language. And then there is the second option. It says the town of Kitty Hawk will have the right to inspect any enclosure. You get an additional 30 points for including that language. And then the third, more extreme one, which I'm not recommending, is that the town will inspect annually enclosures. And you get another 30 points for that one. But as I got looking into the second optional bit for those 30 points, bear with me for 1 second while I find this. One of the duties and responsibilities of the floodplain manager, it's listed as section 14-15 in the draft ordinance. The last sentence in it says that, or the whole part says, make on-site inspections of work in progress. There was another section, that wasn't the one I was thinking of, but it essentially said that the floodplain administrator shall have the right upon displaying proper credentials at a reasonable hour and reasonable time to enter into any premises. So my thinking was, if it's saying that we have that right, not that we're just going to show up and go to anybody's house, but if it says that we have that right in one section of the ordinance, it might be worth restating it in another section just to get the CRS points. But I'll look further at that one, just to make sure I was reading it right when I came across it. But it was just something that kind of dawned on me, and I thought, if it's already saying we have that right, we might as well get points for it.
And there was also one other that I'll add, since you brought that up, that I didn't see in your PowerPoint here. And that is, there was an option that we could adopt less than the 50% rule on an aggregated overtime period time.
Yes, for the substantial improvement, substantial damage.
Right.
You can change, right now, we have a 1-year time frame and 50%. So if somebody, say somebody came in to remodel their house and the remodel work was 40% of the structure value, from the time they get their CO to 1 year after that, they could only spend that remaining 10% before they hit the substantial improvement. You have the option of saying it's a 5-year, or some areas have a cumulative time frame, and you can go change it from 50%, you can drop it down to 30% before it hits substantial improvement. It's up to each individual town. I haven't recommended any changes to what our current practice is on that, but it is one of the options that the council has.
And again, the intent tonight is to make people understand this is a complex issue, and we want to make sure if anybody has discussion that they have a chance to address it. And with regard to the public speaker, the public comment period, unless anybody here has changed their mind, I would ask, do I hear a motion to call for the public hearing?
Mr. Mayor, I move to set a public hearing at the Town Council meeting of March 2nd, 2020, to consider the proposed text amendments to replace the existing Chapter 14 flood damage prevention with the proposed updated Chapter 14 flood damage prevention, as well as to consider adoption of the revised flood insurance study number 37055, C. Charles v. Victor 000, effective date 6/19/2020.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
All right, is there any further discussion?
Rob, the 50% rule, that's based on tax value, but you can also get a certified appraiser,
Right.
correct?
Yes.
Yeah, we, just as a, fallback, if we're not provided that information, we use the
Tax value.
assessed value, but we let the property owner know that, if you get a certified appraisal, it's, the figure's typically going to be higher, and we
Right.
can use that as well.
I just wanted everybody to be aware that may not have been aware of that.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're here, that's what we're trying to accomplish tonight. All right, any further comment?
Just a question. Just because we have the public hearing doesn't mean that we're going to necessarily vote on it that night. We could if we choose to not, correct? But we could also choose to after the public hearing.
Yeah, you can table it for a set time and period. You can't table it forever.
Yeah, I understand. Just
Yeah.
to clarify that, just because we're having the public hearing doesn't mean that we're going to vote on it right that minute, but we very well could.
We very well could.
Yes.
Yes.
Just to have that out there, so,
And you need to think about that one pretty hard.
yes.
All right.
Okay.
All right, any further comment? All in favor?
All right.
Opposed? There are none. All right. Thank you. I appreciate all that hard work.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Rob.
All right, where are we at next? Are we down to the manager? Looks like we are.
Good evening, members of the council, Mr. Mayor. Just several announcements this evening. Just a reminder that our March 2nd town council meeting is going to be pushed up by an hour due to the elections. They'll have elections the next day, so we'll meet at 5 o'clock, our next council meeting in March. Large item pickup is scheduled for February 10th. And then, as you've probably heard, if you go to our website, kittyhawknc.gov, we've submitted to NCDOT the Moore Shore Road project, so you can go on to that website and it'll be available for the next several weeks. You can vote for, hopefully you'll vote for the Moore Shore Road project. It's in the mix with a lot of other communities throughout the state of North Carolina. Really it's just a way to display your project, and whether we receive the award or not, it's been a great project, and it's a multimodal project. So that's why we submitted for that award. So encourage everybody to go to our website. There's a link to it on the homepage to where everybody can go vote for the Moore Shore Road project. And we'll have, I believe it's going to be available for the next couple weeks to vote. You can vote once once a day until it's expired. So that is all the announcements I have this evening. And if you have any questions, I'll stand for any questions.
All right. Okay. All right, I would ask for comments from the town attorney, but he didn't bother to show up.
He's just sick. He was
And do we know why?
sick. He was sick.
He's sick?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. I'm glad he didn't have any legal questions.
And I'm glad he didn't bring us his germs.
All right, and now it's town council time. Craig, let's start with you tonight.
I don't have anything, Mr. Mayor.
Lynn?
All I have is, please take a moment, get on the website, find the link, vote. If you don't find it on the website, Outer Banks Voice published an article, and I'm sure if you called the town, someone would provide you with a return email so you could vote. Please take a moment and put the living shoreline into the Moby Awards for the state.
Bring it alive.
Bring it in.
All right. David?
No, sir, I'm good this evening.
I do. A couple weekends ago, a group of volunteers from Virginia Beach, Chicho's Pizza, and it's called Community House, a group of skimboarders from Virginia Beach, collected over 2,000 Christmas trees and used their own trucks and their equipment to haul them to the Outer Banks and distributed them at several locations. And with the help of Better Beaches, OBX with Donnie King, I think they've distributed quite a few of them on the beach. And I just wanted to thank those folks for all their hard work and time they put into it. That's all I have.
That raises a question for Willie. You still got a whole pile of them there at the bathhouse. What's happening there?
The Boy Scouts will come and finish putting them in before March 1st.
Okay.
And all those should be gone. Also, there's some at Bird Creek as well.
Okay. I'm just wondering, I saw them there. All right, that leaves me, and I do have something, follow-up report basically from the rec committee. Three things came up. One, I noted that they were still having on their work list Twyford to Woods Road. That's the section from Bob Perry Road to the old Primitive Baptist Church. They still had on there a multi-use path to try to push that. That road, that contract, that bridge, that whole deal has been let. So whatever they put there is what we're going to get. So I told them they might as well pull that off of there because that was very narrow to start with. They had a hard time fitting in what they're going to have there, and it's just not possible to put anything else. And we have a multi-use path from Twyford Street and Woods Road, so there is an alternative. And it's just not that far, and there's too much marsh there. So that'll be pulled off. And then one of the members said that they had noticed some yellow bricks around a memorial to Alice Faircloth, and some white stone that had been put there. No one seemed to know who did that. More than likely, though, it would be a family member. We just don't know when it was done or who. I went and I did some checking. The bricks were there, they just weren't painted. The rock is new. And I made the command decision that leave it alone. It doesn't look that bad, and I told them so. So that's off the... And then the last thing was flashing signs. It started out at Moore Shore Road, put one on each end of Moore Shore Road so that oncoming traffic would note their speed and hopefully slow down. And then it morphed into something for the Beach Road, NC 12. So I got to learn a little more about that. But I will say this, the state is not going to do it. I did learn that. The state has done all they're going to do as far as any signage at Moore Shore Road, which are 2 signs on either end of West Kitty Hawk. The state's done all they're going to do for pedestrian traffic on NC 12. So anything that would be done would have to be the town doing it, paying for it, and asking the state permission, which might be possible to get the permission. But those signs, 2 of those signs solar powered would run about $6,000 plus some other change to go along with that. So that can get to be expensive. At the next rec committee, I'll bring it up again, and having learned a little better, I can better address the issue. But unless you folks wanted to put time, money into something like that, that's where it's going to wind up. So I'm bringing it to your attention so you can be aware of it and think of it, and we'll go from there at the next rec committee. All right?
You said on either end of Moore Shore Road.
I'm sorry?
I said you had said that the state had put signs at either end of Moore Shore Road?
No, only on the Woods Road. The bicycle sign that's up there by Leroy's place.
That's on Kitty Hawk Road,
Yeah.
not the Woods
Well, it's
Road.
not on Moore Shore Road, but it's at the entrance to Moore Shore Road.
On Kitty
That
Hawk
was-
Road there.
That was my understanding. That's why those signs
Yeah.
were put there.
Okay. I was just curious because I had some conversations about additional signs and have had issues with speed. And I believe those solar signs are speed limit signs for truck traffic that feels it necessary to speed through the village and speed out the Woods Road. Some of those trucks are clocked at in excess of 50 miles an hour,
Well,
loaded with rock.
okay. That's a police force issue.
Yes.
And I'll ask you to look at that, but I know that right there at the rise of the hill, they often put that temporary flashing sign.
It's on my
So,
road all the time.
I'm sorry?
It's on my road all the time.
Yeah. So, and I see it all over the place, and I see it there quite often. So, Andy, kind of look into that and see if there's something there that we need to know about. All right?
But just to add to that just a little bit, if you go putting one someplace, then somebody else is going to want one, then somebody else is going to want one. Because we have other places that I've been contacted that really wants one as bad as people do at Moore Shore and the skate park. I'm sure some of y'all have heard.
You can't put them everywhere.
Like I was saying, you got to watch out. If we start doing it, then people are going, why'd you do it for this person and not do it for me? So I kind of like the state handling the signs and stuff personally.
Yeah, and we'd have to get permission to start with, so.
Yes.
And I know they would limit the number of them. There's no
Right.
question in my mind of that. All right, well, something to think about. It was brought up. I'm bringing it to your attention. Okay, and I don't have anything else, so public comment, the final public comment. Yes, sir. You came in late. Kitty Hawk starts on time.
I must apologize, I had to go to my two grandsons' basketball games. So,
Well, that's
you know,
important.
That's important.
When it comes to standing before y'all or standing before them, y'all are a whole lot easier to get forgiveness from than they are. So I do apologize for that. My name is Jay Overton, I'm with Albemarle and Associates, and I know Duke had talked to y'all earlier about flood maps. And I just wanted to ask once again, with these flood maps, these are, y'all know the seriousness of them. And when I chair the legislative committee now, and Duke gave that up, and now I have the honor of doing it. And I've been working with engineers and builders and surveyors for the past 2 or 3 years, trying to look at actually how we're going to implement this. And we all started off not wanting to use these maps, and I think we all figured out, well, let's take advantage of the insurance savings that we'll get. But we also wanted to make sure we were constructing to a point that the public safety was what was paramount in what we were doing. And we've made great strides in that. But the other thing that we were looking at, Kitty Hawk as well as all the other municipalities, we have our own way of doing things. And then we have to deal with the state building code, which has some consistency. When we look at, or inconsistencies at times, when we look at the FEMA maps, it's something that's a federal program that's affecting our whole community. When I say that, I mean all of Dare County. So looking at the engineers or surveyors or builders or homeowners or insurance people, mortgage bankers, trying to bring that consistency in how we're writing up our ordinances this time was a major focus that we've had. Of course, we just got the letter of final determination here in December, so now we got to get it all together and get it approved before June. In setting y'all's public hearing, we need to get the public's comments. We need to understand what's going on with them. But we also all are having to try to digest this now. And when we've gone through, Rob has told you some things tonight, but we've looked at changing where we're gonna measure from, the finished floor to the lowest structural member. Well, right now, if you're at an 8 elevation, you're at the finished floor. Well, with this new way of measuring, we're gonna be at the bottom, so automatically you're at 9. So then we've got in here, if you add this or you subtract that, we're not careful, we inadvertently can add 2 or 3 feet of freeboard to somebody's house that we may not want to do. So we're trying to go through right now and get the ordinances. We've got about half of them. And I've got my little diagram where I'm sitting there and I'm looking at the old ordinance. And what does that mean? And then I'm trying to look at the new ordinance and what does that mean? And understanding what we're doing to help our residents make sure that they're protected, but at the same time not have a hardship. So I say all this to say, in your public hearing, the 1st of March, it would be greatly appreciated if we could have that public hearing, if we could hear some more from the public as to how they're seeing this. And I hope we get a bunch of people here that have comments, but then having the time to digest that, where hopefully we wouldn't be trying to make changes and think through things in that meeting setting, but we'd have another 30 days to go through and consider exactly how we're going to adopt this and how we're going to be able to implement it. Because we're going to be living with this for at least another 10 years. We know how long it took to get, it's on a 10-year cycle, they give us the maps and then we're another 5 years. So we might be another 15 years that we're dealing with this ordinance. And hopefully at that point, I won't be dealing with them anymore, but somebody will. So again, I apologize for being late, and I just wanted to ask your consideration for that as we go through this process. Rob knows that I'm here to help in any way I can. If there's any questions, then I would extend that to all of you commissioners. If there's anything I can do to try to help understand from the implementation side of it on the private sector, what we're dealing with, please give me a call. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Let the record show, no one else come forward. A motion to adjourn? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Never anybody.
Never opposed.